Think about that split second when you meet someone new. Before a single word is spoken, their name is already whispering something, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's more than just what you call them. It's like this little uh, cultural snapshot that sets an immediate vibe.
Yeah, names are just, they're like these incredibly packed bits of info, aren't they? They can signal where someone might come from, maybe their background.
And even, as we'll find out, how we might instinctively perceive them, which is kind of amazing.
Exactly.
And that's precisely what we're diving into today. We're taking a deep dive into the fascinating realm of names. We're pulling insights from a really compelling collection of studies that explore what our names tell us about culture, how they subtly shape our perceptions, and even influence something as surprising as, well, how attractive we might find someone.
And we've gathered some really fascinating material for this. We've got a study comparing naming conventions in Chinese and English cultures.
Okay.
Some articles that really unpack the sort of quiet power of names and words on how we think.
Right.
Research into this intriguing idea called sound symbolism. And even a study that tries to gauge the beauty of different European language sounds.
So our goal today, our mission, is to really get under the surface of all this. We want to understand those layers of meaning, embedded in names across different cultures.
Yeah.
And reveal some of the, frankly, unexpected scientific discoveries about how these names are actually perceived.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where should we start? Maybe the cultural roots.
That sounds like an excellent starting point. As one of our sources, the Intercultural Comparative Study highlights the basic job of a name, right, whether you're in China or England, is fundamentally the same.
To tell people apart.
Exactly. Identify people, tell them apart. It's that identifier that sticks with us.
But it's in how these identifiers are put together and where they actually come from. That's where it gets really interesting culturally speaking.
Totally. Let's look at family names first. The study points out the Chinese system has much deeper historical roots, a different kind of complexity compared to the English one. Right, family names first, and they appeared way earlier than given names.
That's right, long before given names. And what's fascinating here is just how far back those roots might go. Many Chinese family names are thought to have originated in what might have been a society where lineage was traced through women, which is interesting in itself.
Wow, okay.
Beyond that, names could come from, important positions someone held, like Xuanyuan, or the place they lived, like Donggu, which means Eastern Wall. Or even their family's land or title, like the name Qin. Professions, too, and even adapting names from different ethnic minority groups played a role.
So it really reveals a culture deeply rooted in lineage, social hierarchy right from the start, your identity tied immediately to your origins.
Exactly. A very different picture than English family names, which, as the study notes, really only gained traction in the Middle Ages, mostly after the Norman conquest.
And initially, they were more for the nobility, right? A marker of being someone important or wealthy.
Pretty much, yeah. And then, as populations grew, English family names sort of broadened out. They started reflecting more everyday aspects of life.
Like what people did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
See origins and professions: cook, smith, tailor. The landscape around them: hill, lake, wood.
Personal traits, like small or wise.
Or where they were from, like Kent.
Oh.
And, of course, patronymic son of, like Jackson, Richardson.
So maybe a more pragmatic start,
Yeah.
less tied to ancient lineage, more to immediate circumstances.
You could perhaps frame it that way, yeah. A later, maybe more utilitarian beginning for many English family names compared to the Chinese system.
Okay, so the origins are quite different. Now, how about the structure? The order itself is flipped, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. The way they're formed is distinct. In Chinese, typically family name first, then the given name. So, Li Ming.
Li Ming, got it.
And historically, you also had courtesy names, literary names for more formal stuff, and childhood nicknames were super common.
And in Britain?
Other way around. Given name first, then family name. James Jones. Plus, you often have middle names. Christian names are part of the tradition. Nicknames exist there too, of course.
Okay. And if we zoom in on the given names themselves, what are some of the key cultural differences the study points out there?
Well, several interesting things. Chinese given names often have a very set structure, usually one or two characters, and they're chosen very intentionally.
The meaning.
For meaning, yes, or to express the parent's hopes. You might see names like Wenwu, suggesting someone scholarly and martial.
Oh, interesting combination.
Or Ziwan, meaning someone with ambition. Gender is often clearly signaled to certain characters like Jiang, often in male names, King in female names.
And the study mentioned something about reflecting historical periods.
Yeah, that's fascinating too. Names like Jianguo, which means something like nation building, were apparently more popular during specific times in Chinese history. It ties the individual to the collective moment.
Wow, that's a powerful connection. What about English given names? What are the characteristics there?
English given names can be one or more, often linked to a baptism ceremony. The order is typically first, then middle, then last name.
And the origins.
Oh, incredibly long and diverse histories. They draw from all sorts of other languages, carry symbolic meanings like Helen apparently meaning charming, or Lily, well, representing the flower.
Biblical names are huge too, right?
Very common, yes. Adam, Marie, John, Elizabeth. And also the practice of using family names as given names, like Roosevelt Jr. And just like in China, nicknames are everywhere. Bus for Elizabeth, Bob for Robert.
And gender patterns.
There are definitely patterns. Female names, for instance, often end in vowel sounds more frequently than male names, though that's obviously not a strict rule.
It's really fascinating seeing these different cultural approaches side by side, and I bet this leads to some tricky situations when you try to translate names between the two.
Oh, absolutely. This study emphasizes transliteration, trying to represent the original sounds, is the most direct method.
But the sounds aren't always equivalent, are they?
Exactly. The different sets of sounds, the phonemes, in Chinese and English, can make that quite challenging. And cultural conventions really matter.
Like the name order.
Right. The accepted way now to write a Chinese name in English is to keep the original order, family name first, like Li Mingyu.
Okay.
But historically, translating English names into Chinese has been, well, less consistent, sometimes leading to what the study calls chaotic results.
Why chaotic?
Because Chinese has so many homophones, words that sound the same but mean different things, choosing the wrong characters for an English sound could lead to some odd or unintended meanings.
Ah, okay, I see. So names are deeply wrapped up in culture, history, social meaning. Loads there.
Definitely.
But now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about something that might seem, I don't know, more fundamental, the hidden power of the sounds themselves.
Yes. This is where sound symbolism comes in.
Right. So we've seen how culture shapes the what and how of naming. Now let's drill down to the actual sounds and how they might be influencing us.
This is where things get really, really interesting. For a long time in linguistics, the science of language, there was this dominant idea, mainly from Ferdinand de Saussure.
The arbitrary nature of the sign.
Exactly. The idea that the connection between a word's sound and its meaning is basically random, arbitrary. But sound symbolism challenges that. It suggests there are non-arbitrary links between sounds and meanings.
And the classic example, the one everyone mentions, is the Maluma-Tekate effect. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So imagine I show you two shapes. One is rounded, curvy, like a cloud. The other is sharp, pointy, angular, like a starburst.
Okay, got it.
Now I give you two nonsense words, Maluma and Tekate. And I ask you, which word goes with which shape?
Instinctively. Maluma feels round, Tekate feels sharp.
You got it. And overwhelmingly, like 90% of people, make that exact same connection. Maluma round, Tekate sharp.
And this works even if people have never heard those words before.
Precisely. And what's really striking is that it holds up across different age groups, different languages, different cultures. It's like our brains have this default mapping.
Pointy sounds go with pointy things. Round sounds with round things.
Sort of, yeah. It seems pretty intuitive.
And it's not just those two specific words, right? There are broader sound patterns.
No, definitely not just those two. Research shows wider patterns. Consonant sounds like L, M, N, the more sonorous ones, the ones that resonate more.
Like in Maluma.
Exactly. They often get linked to roundness. Whereas sharper, voiceless stops like PTK sounds, where your vocal cords don't vibrate, like in pat, top, cat.
Like in Tekate.
Right. Those tend to be associated with angularity, with sharpness.
And vowels play a role too.
Yeah.
Something about big and small.
Yes, the mil-mol effect. High front vowels like the E sound in feet or C linguists write it as those are often linked to smallness.
Mil-mol, okay.
Whereas low back vowels like the ah in father or large, written as ah, tend to be linked to largeness.
Mal, large. Mil-mol. Got it. So these are like basic sound building blocks, the phonemes carrying some kind of shape or size association.
That's the idea. And researchers test this using all sorts of nonsense words like horgoose or geeks, precisely because they don't have any existing meaning.
To isolate the sound effect.
Exactly. And they find people consistently rate words like, say, aki or gricker as sounding small. Ambo sounds round. Axidic, or Krukwick sounds sharp, even feminine, like Hionia.
And people can even draw these.
Yeah. They ask one group to draw creatures based on these nonsense names, then another group has to match the drawings back to the names, and they do it much better than chance.
That's wild. So this sound-shape connection, it must extend to actual names, too. You mentioned the Bouba-Kiki effect.
Yes, exactly. It's the same principle applied to real first names. People are more likely to pair round-sounding names. Think Molly, Leo, Bob, with rounder shapes or silhouettes.
And sharp names.
Sharp-sounding names like Kate, Kirk, Rick, Erica get paired with more angular, sharper silhouettes.
So Bob looks round, Kirk looks sharp, just based on the sound.
That's the tendency people show in experiments, yes. And it's not just an English thing. They found a similar pattern with French names, the Benoît-Terrick effect, even when tested on people who don't speak French.
Wow. And it gets even weirder, right? It affects how we perceive actual faces.
It seems to. Research has found that round-sounding names are seen as a better fit for rounder faces and sharp-sounding names for more angular faces.
A better fit, meaning people prefer it.
Yes, people actually show a preference for faces when they're paired with names that have this sound shape match.
Okay, that's interesting. But the study mentioned elections. Seriously?
Yeah, kind of surprisingly. One study looked at U.S. Senate candidates and found a correlation between how well the sound symbolism of their name matched the general shape of their face and their success in the election.
Okay, hold on. That seems a bit much. Is that really causal?
Well, correlation isn't causation, obviously. It's just one finding. But it suggests these subtle biases might play out in unexpected real-world scenarios.
Still, it's a provocative idea. But surely there are limits. Does sound symbolism always win out?
No, definitely not. The research is clear on that. Information we already have about a name is often much stronger.
Like gender.
Exactly. Gender stereotypes associated with a name usually override the sound symbolism. One study used alien characters.
Okay.
And names with vowel sounds that theoretically suggest large or small. When people had to match names to big or small aliens, the typical gender of the name, whether it sounded male or female, had a much bigger impact on their guess than the vowel sound itself.
So knowing Omar is usually male is a stronger clue than any large or small vowel sound in it.
Pretty much. Pre-existing knowledge and social associations can definitely lessen or even just cancel out the pure sound symbolism effect.
Okay, that makes sense. So sounds influence shape perception, maybe even face perception, but with limits. What about more abstract stuff, like personality?
Ah, yes, another fascinating layer. Studies suggest we do link name sounds to abstract personality traits, too. Well, names with more of those round sounds, the L, M, N sounds, tend to get associated with what researchers describe as a round and curvy personality.
Meaning
Easygoing, adaptable, maybe friendly, agreeable.
Okay, and the sharp-sounding names?
Those get linked to a more sharp and spiky personality. Think determined, maybe quicker-tempered, perhaps more rigid or precise.
So just by hearing an unfamiliar name, the sounds alone can nudge us towards thinking someone might be, say, more easygoing or more determined.
That's what the research suggests, yes. People will make judgments about the likelihood of someone possessing certain traits based purely on the phonetic qualities of a name they've never heard before.
Which makes you wonder, does this play a role in, like, naming trends? Why certain names become popular? Or why some sounds feel more male or female?
It's a really good question, and the research suggests it might. There's some evidence, for instance, that female names are statistically more likely to contain those vowel sounds associated with smallness, the I sounds.
A Mill effect.
Right. While male names might more often feature vowels linked to largeness, the mal-I sounds.
And why would that be?
Well, one hypothesis is that parents might, perhaps subconsciously, be drawn to names with sound associations that kind of align with societal gender stereotypes. Smallness may be linked to gentleness for girls. Largeness may be linked to strength for boys. It's speculative, but...
But it fits with other findings, like about job success.
Exactly. There are findings suggesting people rate job success as more likely for individuals whose names sound stereotypically masculine or feminine, depending on the context. The sound itself carries an expectation.
It even shows up in fiction, doesn't it? How authors pick character names.
Absolutely. It's a great tool for writers. The sound of a character's name can really enhance how we perceive them, reinforce their personality.
Like Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings is a perfect example researchers use. The sort of bouncy, round sounds in his name really seem to fit his cheerful, robust, slightly eccentric personality.
And Pokemon. Really?
Apparently so. One analysis found that Pokemon names use certain consonant sounds, the ones linked to larger sizes, more prominently. for the characters that actually are bigger and stronger in the game.
So the sounds subtly echo the characteristics. That's incredibly thought-provoking.
It really is.
Now, speaking of sounds and perception,
Hmm.
our sources also touched on the idea of the beauty of language sounds. That feels like a very subjective area.
It is inherently subjective, yes, but some interesting research has tried to look at it more objectively, focusing on the phonetic characteristics.
Like that study on European languages.
Exactly. They had participants listen to recordings of 24 different European languages. Crucially, the listeners didn't recognize the languages they were hearing.
So they weren't biased by knowing, oh, that's French or that's German.
Right. They just rated the sound of the language on scales like beauty, eros, status, order, purely based on the acoustic qualities.
And what did they find? Any patterns?
One interesting finding was a link between the prevalence of back vowels in a language, those oo and ah sounds, like in goose or father, and how highly that language was rated for beauty. Languages with more of those sounds tended to be perceived as more beautiful by listeners.
Back vowels and beauty.
Yeah.
Okay, and this connects to that other study you mentioned, the one ranking baby names. My first years.
Yes, it connects in the sense that the My First Year study also tried to apply linguistic principles, specifically iconicity or sound symbolism, to rank popular baby names in the UK and US for beauty.
How did they even do that?
Well, they took phonetic transcriptions of popular names and then assigned scores based on the supposed emotional valence, the positive or negative feeling associated with each individual sound or foam.
Based on it, how did they decide a sound's valence?
That's a key point. The methodology apparently relied heavily on analyzing the emotional associations of sounds as they appear in English words. So if a sound appears more often in positive English words, it gets a higher score.
Okay, I can see some potential issues there, but what were the results? What names came out on top as most beautiful?
According to their ranking, in the UK, the top boys' names were Zane, Jesse, and Charlie.
Zane! Interesting.
And for girls, it was Sophia, Zoe, and Rosie. They also noted that names of male members of the royal family, like William, tended to rank highly.
And in the U.S., similar.
Some overlap, some differences. Top U.S. boys' names were Matthew, Julian, and William. For girls, Sophia and Zoe again, but also Everly. And they noticed names starting with E seemed to score particularly well in the U.S. lists.
Sophia and Zoe topping both lists.
Yeah.
Interesting. But you mentioned issues with the method. What are the main limitations here?
Well, the study itself acknowledged some. Relying on English word associations to score sounds in names is a big one. It doesn't really account for how pronunciation varies wildly with accents.
True.
Or the huge role that cultural context plays. A name might sound beautiful based on this analysis, but have negative cultural connotations, or vice versa.
And just looking at sounds in isolation misses how they blend together, right?
Exactly. The combination of sounds in a name, the rhythm, the flow, that creates an overall impression that scoring individual phones might completely miss. Plus, some sound combinations might just be harder or easier to say, which could affect preference.
So it's an interesting attempt, but maybe take the specific rankings with a grain of salt.
I think that's fair, yes. It highlights the idea that sound patterns might influence perceived attractiveness, but the execution has limitations.
Which kind of brings us to the bigger picture then. What else influences how we judge language sounds beyond just the raw acoustics or these potential sound symbolism effects?
Right. It's really an interplay, isn't it, between any sort of inherent aesthetic value of the sounds themselves, if such a thing truly exists, and what researchers call the imposed norm.
Meaning social context.
Exactly. Social context, stereotypes, cultural associations, personal experiences. Think about the mere exposure effect.
We like things more just because we've heard them more often.
Basically, yeah. Familiarity breeds liking, to some extent. The example given was hurricane names, apparently. Names used for major hurricanes sometimes see a bump in popularity afterwards, perhaps just because people have heard them repeated so much.
Wow, that is a strange effect of familiarity.
Isn't it? And there's also similar stuff like phonetic compatibility. Research shows people tend to prefer first names that don't clash awkwardly with the family name.
Like avoiding too many sounds running together.
Yeah, things like that, making sure the whole name flows reasonably well. And then, of course, overriding almost everything else are the big factors. Cultural norms about appropriate names, gender associations, family traditions, honoring relatives.
So all that personal and cultural meaning often trumps any subtle preference for certain beautiful sounds?
Absolutely. While some basic principles of sound symbolism seem robust, and maybe certain sound patterns are broadly found appealing, the world of names is just this incredibly rich mix of culture, history, personal meaning, and social signaling.
Okay, so wrapping this up then, what are the main takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I think first, names are far more than just labels. They're packed with cultural and historical information. Second, the sounds of names have these surprising, often unconscious effects on our perception, influencing how we see shapes, judge faces, and even infer personality traits.
The whole sound symbolism angle?
Right. And third, while there might be some phonetic patterns linked to aesthetic appeal, the beauty aspect, things like cultural background, familiarity, and personal significance, are usually way more important in how we actually choose and respond to names.
It's a complex interplay. This has been genuinely fascinating. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Mm.
Considering all these insights, how might the sounds of your own name or the names of people you know be subtly influencing perceptions in ways you'd maybe never even considered before?
It's a great question to ponder.
Maybe take a moment, reflect on the names you personally find appealing or maybe unappealing. Could any of these phonetic principles, the sound symbolism stuff, be subconsciously at play?
It certainly opens up a new lens for listening to the world.
Definitely. And perhaps encourages a little further exploration into fields like sound symbolism or onomastics, the study of names themselves. There's clearly a lot more to uncover.